The rain of the night before had left the dirt of Las Cruces dark and heavy, the street a mess of wagon ruts, filled with shallow water that mirrored the weak, gray morning light. The air tasted of wet earth, mesquite smoke, and the sour tang of stale beer seeping from the saloon across the road. Wyatt stepped onto the warped porch of the railman's boarding house. He was a man carved from the land itself, lean and hard, his face a canvas of sun-bleached calm that came only from surviving things most men didn't live to speak of. He had once been a scout, his eyes trained to read the silent language of a broken twig or a distant dust cloud. Now, he guarded freight, a simpler life that paid in coin and solitude. Today was about coin, payment for a delivery of cloth and flour. A straightforward job, get paid, buy supplies, ride north before dusk swallowed the day. Inside, the lobby was a stagnant pool of shadow, lit by a single, flickering oil lamp. The air was thick, tasting of old sweat and regret. A big man with a face like a raw slab of beef leaned back in a chair, chewing a matchstick down to pulp. Another was passed out on a bench, an empty whiskey bottle resting on the floor beneath his slack hand. Wyatt gave them a nod that asked for nothing and expected the same in return. He moved toward the narrow hallway leading to the back rooms, where the owner kept his office and his secrets. Halfway down, he stopped. It was a sound almost too faint to catch, not the groan of old wood, but something sharper, more alive. A woman's muffled cry, swallowed by the walls. His heart didn't race. It tightened, a cold, familiar knot that signaled the arrival of trouble. He knew this feeling, the pull of something that wasn't his business but was about to become it. He followed the sound to a door with a bent latch and paint that peeled like sunburnt skin. The frame was cracked, brutalized by countless forced entries. He laid his palm flat against the wood, the grain rough beneath his callous skin, and pushed. The door swung inward with a long, mournful groan. The room was a cage, barely bigger than a closet. A narrow cot, a tin basin on the floor, and a small window high on the wall, nailed shut. The air was heavy with the scent of damp cloth and fear. In the corner, crouched low like a cornered animal, was a young Apache woman, Dolores. Her skin was the color of rich earth after a summer rain, and her long black hair, unbound and damp, clung to her neck and shoulders. She wore nothing but a thin, off-white linen shift, torn at the neckline, the rip traveling down to expose the sharp line of her collarbone. Another tear ran high on her hip, the fabric clinging to the curve of her thigh in the humid air. Her eyes, dark and deep as a starless desert night, locked onto his. There was terror in them, yes, but it was buried beneath a layer of something harder, something forged in fire. Defiance. Wyatt froze in the doorway, his hand still on the frame. He had seen women in her situation before, during the war, and the memory was a bitter taste in his mouth. But she was different. There was no plea in her gaze, only a silent, ferocious warning. Do not mistake me for helpless. Asterisk. You have seen me, she said, her voice a low, guttural whisper. Her English was broken, each word a stone she had to lift and place with care. You have seen me undressed. Now, you must marry me, or they will kill us both. The words hung in the suffocating air, a strange and desperate bargain. He glanced over his shoulder down the empty, shadowed hallway. Who's coming? He asked, his own voice a low rasp. They keep me here, she said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with a cold, contained rage. They say I am worthless now. They will sell me to the men who kill for sport. Her hands, he noticed, were clenched into tight fists at her sides, knuckles white against her dark skin. Before he could process the impossible weight of her demand, the hallway erupted. Heavy boots pounding on the wooden planks, the sharp scrape of a spur. A man's voice, thick with whiskey and malice, barked. Time's up, girl. Another man laughed, a short, ugly sound that promised violence. Wyatt didn't hesitate. He stepped fully inside the room, kicking the door shut with his heel. The chair by the cot was flimsy, but it would have to do. He jammed it under the doorknob as a fist hammered against the other side. What's this? A voice roared. You think she's yours now, you bastard? He ignored them. His mind was already a step ahead, calculating angles, timing, survival. He could leave. He could force his way out and tell himself it wasn't his fight. But the image of her eyes, that unbroken pride in the face of utter despair, had already staked its claim on him. A blood-stained handkerchief, tucked deep in his pocket, felt suddenly heavy, a ghost of another woman he had failed. He would not fail again. He turned to her and pointed to the small, nailed-shut window. That's our way out." She stared at him, her dark eyes searching his face, weighing the truth of his intentions. Min had given her orders before, and those orders had always come at a price. But his voice was even, his eyes steady. She gave a single, sharp nod. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulled a folding knife from his belt, and began to pry at the window sash. The old wood splintered. As he worked, he shrugged out of his heavy trail coat, the worn wool still holding the scent of dust and open sky, and held it out to her. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then took it, her fingers brushing his. A spark, hot and unexpected, passed between them. She slipped the coat over her shoulders, the garment swallowing her small frame, hiding her bare skin from the world but wrapping her in his scent. The fist hit the door again, harder this time. The chair shuddered, threatening to give way. "Out," Wyatt said, his voice a low command. He placed his hands on her waist, his touch firm but careful, and lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, a bird made of hollow bones and fierce will. He set her feet on the damp ground of the narrow alley behind the boarding house. He followed a moment later, dropping into the shadows and the smell of wet dust. He took her hand. Her skin was cool, her grip surprisingly strong. He didn't pull, just guided her, and they moved as one down the alley, past rain barrels and the reek of garbage from the saloon's back door. Behind them, shouts echoed, the sound of splintering wood, followed by the pound of boots in pursuit. At the edge of the freight yard, his wagon waited, a dark shape against the gray dawn. He lifted her inside without a word, his hands lingering at her waist for a beat longer than necessary. He dropped the canvas flap, plunging her into darkness, and climbed onto the driver's bench. A sharp snap of the reins, and the team lurched forward, their hooves splashing through the muddy puddles. The shouts faded behind them. Wyatt didn't look back. He could feel her eyes on him through the canvas, a silent, burning question. He knew, as Las Cruces dissolved into the morning mist, that his simple life had just ended. This was something else entirely, a dangerous, uncharted territory, and there was no turning back.